Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to today's Wild Rift video. Backed by popular demand, I'm going to be showing you all the 5 best champions that you can play in patch 5.0a. In this video, I'm going to be showing you one champion from every single role. Whether it's a champion that got buffed in the most recent patch, or a champion that has been performing incredibly well over in solo queue. These are the best champions that you should be trying out to expand your champion pool. First up in the Baron lane, let's talk about the Big Beast Set. Now with Set, you normally build him as a bruiser since he does really well with both tank items and damage items. But recently, players have been playing Set a lot differently, going for items like the brand new Heartsteel and Titanic Hydra. This makes him more into a tank. He does really well with runes like Grassy Undying, and this will give him more health to give him more damage to his second ability. His second ability, every single time that you take damage, you store a percentage of your health as grit. And when that grit gets stacked up, especially when it's at maximum stacks, when you use the ability, you could do a whole heap of true damage. That is thanks to all the health that he is building with Heartsteel, Titanic Hydra, Grassy Undying, and Overgrowth. And that is exactly what we have with his build. You can see here that we go for Heartsteel as a first item. It wasn't really a great item at the start of Wild Rift, but after some of the most recent buffs, it's really been performing as an incredible tank item. For the boots, you either go for the armor boots or the magic resist boots, depending on the damage source on the enemy team. Black Cleaver is still a great item for Set because you have the auto attack reset on your first ability. You can reduce the armor of enemy champions fairly quickly. Titanic Hydra, because we're going to be getting a lot of maximum health from Heartsteel and other items and runes, we're going to be getting a lot of extra attack damage from this item. Sterak's Gauge to give us more attack damage and maximum health and give us that lifeline shield. And since we don't have a lot of resistances, Amarant's Twin Guard as our last item is incredible because it gives us a more tenacity, more armor, and more maximum health when we're in combat for a long amount of time. As for the runes, these are a little bit different to what we're usually seeing on Set. We're going for a more tankiness sort of Set build with Grassy Undying, Courage of the Colossus, which works really well with Set's ultimate or his third ability. Second Wind to work really well with his passive to give him more health every single time he regenerates out of combat. Overgrowth to give you more health so you get more damage from Heartsteel and other items. And then Brutal to give you the extra auto attack damage, especially with the auto attack reset on your first ability. And for the summer spells, we of course have Flash. We can use our Flash to get behind enemy champions to ulti them into our team, and Ignite so we can play more aggressive during the laning phase. Onto the jungle now, we have the Blind Monk Lee Sin. Lee Sin has been a champion that has been performing incredibly well over the last few patches. His high playmaking potential and high burst damage makes him incredible for any solo queue situation. He is, however, a champion that heavily relies on skill shots, especially with all of his mobility from his first ability and his second ability. However, if you can master Lee Sin with these skill shots, if you're able to know how to use his combo and deal the most amount of damage in a short amount of time, you can easily look to try and carry any game with Lee Sin. For the build with Lee Sin, we go for a very aggressive build where we build a lot of damage because we want to be one of the main carries on our team. Gluttonous Greaves as the first sort of item in a way, quote unquote, giving us a lot of damage and also a little bit of sustain when we're jumping onto enemy champions. Ghostblade is a very cheap item when playing in the jungle. The movement speed helps you get around the map a lot quicker, so you can look for ganks. Trinity Force, another incredible item that gives Lee Sin all the stats that he needs: health, attack damage, attack speed, and also the Sheen passive. Every single time we use an ability gives us that extra burst of damage. Sterak's Gauge for the extra health and attack damage and the lifeline shields. Mortal Reminder for even more damage and a little bit of a chance to be able to critically strike. But the most important thing with Mortal Reminder is getting the healing reduction onto enemy champions and having that percentage armor penetration. And then Guardian Angel is a must on Lee Sin, especially if you're new with him. Sometimes when you jump in with Lee Sin, you are going to make mistakes and maybe jump in a little bit too far. But with Guardian Angel, it's there to resurrect you and keep you alive. As for the runes, you have two options for your main rune. I prefer to go for Conqueror, but a lot of players like to also go for First Strike. If you're advanced with Lee Sin, I would highly recommend to go First Strike because you'll be able to deal the first instance of damage and be able to get a lot of more burst damage. But if you're more of a beginner, I highly recommend Conqueror. For the domination runes, we're going to go for Sudden Impact. We have plenty of abilities that allow allows us to dash in a direction, giving us a little bit of extra damage. Empowered attack works on jungle camps and also works on enemy champions to give us that little bit of extra damage. Eyeball collector for the extra attack damage every single time we get a takedown. And overgrowth is just overall a great rune in the jungle because you get a lot of free maximum health when clearing through all the monsters. And for the summer spells, of course, we have flash for the insane playmaking and flashy plays that we can make on Lee Sin, and smite so we can secure them high profile objectives. In the mid lane, we have Syndra. Syndra is one of the new champions that came out on Wild Rift a few weeks ago. She was already considered a very strong mid lane mage that has a lot of burst damage, a lot of incredible range, and a lot of crowd control. But for some reason, Riot decided to buff her even more in the most recent patch. Syndra is a great long-range mage that deals a lot of damage from afar, but also likes to control her Dark Spheres to be able to deal damage, or even crowd control to deal huge heavy burst damage with her ultimate. In the laning phase, Syndra can use her long range to bully champions out in the early game, and with the extra maximum health she has now, she could play a little bit more aggressive and not be afraid too much about taking a lot of damage. And with Syndra, when she gets later on into the game, she can evolve her abilities, making them even stronger. Whether it's her first ability getting 2 charges of her Dark Sphere, which also got buffed in the most recent patch, extra true damage on the second ability, or even extra spread and extra CC range with her third ability. The build with Syndra looks very familiar to everyone since it's a pretty standard AP mid lane mage build. We have Boots of Mana to give you a lot of ability power, and also the mana regeneration in the early game makes this extremely valuable. Luden's Echo for the extra burst damage and the extra wave clear with the spread damage on the passive. Infinity Orb to give us a little bit of crit damage on our abilities when champions are low on health. Death Cap to give us a lot of ability power over time. And then we have items like Crown of the Shattered Queen to give us that little defensive shield just in case we get jumped on by assassins, and Awakened Soul Stealer to give us extra burst damage in the late game. As for the runes, First Strike is a must on Syndra. As I've already mentioned, she has incredible range with her abilities, making it really easy to be the one to deal the first instance of damage. So when you use your Dark Spheres to control around team fights, you can then use the extra burst damage on top of that, or even the root from the third ability, being able to just stack on all the damage onto one singular champion. Scorch for the extra poke damage is a must. Cheap Shot, our second ability, and our third ability are ways to impair the movement of enemy champions. Eyeball Collector gives us a lot of extra ability power over time, and Transcendence for extra ability haste so we can use our abilities more often. And for the spells, we have Flash and Ignite. We want to take Flash just to be more defensive, and Ignite so when we stun enemy champions, we can use this to deal the extra little tick of damage. Down in the dual lane, we have everyone's favorite Sheriff Caitlyn, one of the easiest dual lane marksmen that you will pick up. Caitlyn's strength comes from her auto attacks and her incredible range with her rifle. She has one of the longest attack ranges of any dual lane carry in the game. And using this in the early laning phase to be able to poke enemy champions or to attack them from afar makes you win every single laning phase possible. And then when you're able to win laning phases, you can use this to snowball into the mid and the late game with all your carry items, keeping your distance between yourself and enemy champions and sniping them from afar. Caitlyn's build is very similar to every other dual lane's carries builds. We have Gluttonous Grease for the sustain and the attack damage. Bloodthirster, again, another great sustain item that gives us extra attack damage and attack speed when we're high on health. And speaking of range, Magnetic Blaster as well gives us even more attack range every single time that this item is up and available. Infinity Edge for the increased crit damage and incredible damage overall. Mortal Reminder for the percent armor penetration and extra damage. And the last item being Guardian Angel, just in case we have something like a Kha'Zix or a Kayn on the other team that might be able to one-shot us so we can resurrect and come back to life and help deal a lot of damage. As for the runes, Lethal Tempo is a great rune for Caitlyn. She already has incredible range, and with this extra attack speed that you'll be able to get with Lethal Tempo, you'll be able to turn your rifle into a machine gun and deal a lot of damage. Brutal for the extra auto attack damage, is great for marksmen like Caitlyn. Giant Slayer, really good in this meta, especially because a lot of champions are going for items like Heart Steel and Titanic Hydra. Ledger Bloodline for the extra sustain over time, and bow plating just to protect us from any incoming damage. And for the summer spells, we have Flash and Exhaust. Now, Exhaust can be swapped out for Ghost if you feel like you can benefit more from the movement speed, and sometimes Exhaust you won't be in range since Caitlyn has a lot of attack range, but Exhaust is still really good for any mobile champions that might be on the enemy team that might dash just within range of Exhaust so they can deal less damage to you. And last but by no means least, down in the support role, we have Lux. Now, this champion works differently to any other support champion that you might have played. Lux works more as a carry support rather than a defense support, someone like Nami, Sona, or even Yuumi, for example. Lux's base damage and just damage overall is absolutely absurd, and when you play her as a support, you'll still be able to get a lot of gold income, which means you could just build damage items and turn yourself into more of a carry. Now, with Lux, she focuses a lot on her abilities, so she's a bit still skill shot reliant, but as long as you land your first ability, this gives really easy access to land your third ability and also your ultimate, being able to one-shot nearly every champion on the Rift. As for the build with Lux, we still obviously want to go for the support item. You can go for Relic Shield or Ancient Coin. Any one of these two support items are great to go. Boots of Mana, again, similar to the mid lane, we want the extra mana regeneration so we can use our abilities, and also the ability power makes it an incredibly valuable item. And then after the boots, it's a pretty standard AP build. We've going Luden's Echo for the extra spread damage and mana, Infinity Orb so we can crit with our abilities when enemies are low on health, Death Cap for the incredible overall ability power, and Crown of the Shattered Queen just for a defensive item, just in case we need it. First Strike is a must on Lux as well. She always wants to stay in the fog of war and out of vision, and if you have vision of enemy champions, you can use this to your advantage using your first ability Light Binding to catch enemies off guard, which means you can proc First Strike and deal extra true damage with your other abilities. Scorch for the extra poke damage, especially during laning phase, is great. Cheap Shot, again, we're going to be using our first ability a lot as our main combo source, so it gives us that extra bit of true damage. Eyeball Collector, when we get kills and assists, we're going to be gaining a lot of extra ability power. And Transcendence for the extra ability haste, so we can use our abilities more often. And as for the summer spells, we want to play aggressive with Lux support, dealing a lot of damage, so we're going to go for Ignite and Flash just in case we need to flash in to deal that killing blow. And that's all the champions that I wanted to highlight for patch 5.0a. If you feel like there's a champion that should be highlighted in these type of videos, let me know down below in the comments. I'll be able to interact and talk to you all more about the game. And as always, make sure you like the video, subscribe for more amazing content, and I'll see you all in the next Wild Rift video. Peace.